You stayed calm. You chose your words carefully. You explained your intentions step by step, thinking clarity would bring peace. And instead of things getting better, something strange happened. She became colder, sharper, more emotional. It felt like the more reasonable you became, the less you existed in the room. That moment is where most men get trapped, because you were taught that logic resolves conflict, that if you explain clearly enough, calmly enough, patiently enough, the situation will settle. But what you experienced wasn't failure of communication. It was something far more unsettling. Logic had lost its power entirely. When emotion takes control, it doesn't sit at the table with reason. It replaces it. You weren't ignored because you were wrong. You were ignored because the system you were speaking to was no longer listening. Her emotional state wasn't debating you, it was driving. And every additional explanation you offered didn't soothe the situation. It confirmed, to her nervous system, that you didn't understand what was actually happening. This is why men feel helpless in these moments. You do everything right. You don't raise your voice. You don't insult. You don't withdraw. And still, the outcome gets worse. The respect drops. The connection thins. And inside, a quiet panic starts forming. Why isn't this working? Here's the part no one tells you. Logic only works before emotion takes the wheel. Once emotion is in control, logic doesn't negotiate. It threatens. It invalidates. It escalates even when spoken softly. This video isn't about arguing better. It's about understanding why. In emotional moments, reason stops being a tool at all. And once you see that mechanism clearly, you'll stop trying to win conversations that were never logical to begin with. Once emotion crosses a certain threshold, cognition no longer leads. It follows if it's allowed in at all. This is the first truth most men never learn, and it's why reason fails exactly when they rely on it most. Strong emotion doesn't coexist with rational processing. It overrides it. Emotion is not a thought. It's a survival response. When a woman's emotional state spikes, her nervous system isn't asking what makes sense, it's scanning for safety, threat, or relief. Logic belongs to a different system entirely. It's secondary, slower, designed for reflection, not defense. And survival systems don't debate, they react. This is where the male mistake begins. Men try to explain. They organize thoughts. They clarify intentions. They offer solutions. From their perspective, this is leadership. From her nervous system's perspective, it's irrelevant. She isn't looking for answers, she's trying to regulate what she's feeling in her body. That's why the signals look so confusing. She interrupts logic mid-sentence. She repeats the same feeling again and again, even after you've addressed it. She ignores solutions that would objectively fix the problem. None of this means she's being irrational. It means her system isn't operating on reason at all. Think of it this way, when the body believes it's under threat, it doesn't stop to calculate. It mobilizes. Emotion is that. Mobilization. And the more you push logic into that moment, the more it feels like pressure, dismissal, or control, even if your tone is calm. Men hear resistance and try harder. Women feel intensity and turn inward. The mismatch escalates because each side is operating from a different system. One wants resolution, the other wants regulation. This is why explanations fall flat, why solutions get ignored, why calm words can trigger stronger reactions. You're speaking to the mind while the body is in charge. You can't reason with a nervous system in defense mode. Once you understand this, the entire interaction reconfigures. You stop seeing emotional resistance as a communication failure. You recognize it as a biological state. And when you stop trying to fix emotion with logic, you stop feeding the very loop that keeps you unheard. Men move through conflict, trying to close the loop. They want resolution, an answer, a fix that ends the discomfort so both people can move forward. That instinct makes sense for a male nervous system, but it completely misreads how female emotional processing works in the moment. Women do not move from facts to feelings. They move from feelings to facts. Emotional discharge comes first. Understanding comes later if it comes at all. Until that discharge happens, facts don't land. Explanations don't register. Logic doesn't integrate. It just floats above the experience, unheard. This is why men feel like they're speaking clearly, while women feel unheard at the same time. When she says, "You're not hearing me," she isn't accusing you of misunderstanding the details. She's telling you something more precise. Her emotional state has not been acknowledged at the level it needs to be felt. Men hear that sentence and immediately try to clarify their state. They explain more carefully. They correct inaccuracies. And every time they do, the gap widens. Because she wasn't asking to be corrected, she was asking to be felt, not agreed with, not fixed, recognized. Validation of feeling is not validation of behavior. But when emotion is active, the nervous system doesn't make that distinction yet. It needs confirmation that the internal state is seen before it can release its grip. Until then, facts feel premature, even threatening, because they signal dismissal. This is why repeating feelings is so common. She isn't looping to annoy you. She's looping because the discharge hasn't happened. The system hasn't calmed enough to move forward. And until it does, no amount of reasoning will satisfy her. Men seek resolution. Women seek validation of feeling. Once the feeling is acknowledged, something shifts. The emotional intensity drops. The body relaxes. And only then does cognition re-enter the room. That's when facts can be processed. That's when explanations can land. That's when logic finally has access. To her, feeling understood comes before being convinced. When you understand this sequence, you stop trying to force understanding at the wrong time. You stop arguing with emotion and start recognizing its order of operations. And the moment you respect that order, conversations that used to spiral suddenly begin to move again. Not because you said better things, but because you waited for the system to be ready to hear them. When emotion is active, logic doesn't arrive as neutral information. It arrives as judgment. This is the third truth, and it explains why situations escalate precisely when men think they're being the most reasonable. In an emotional state, the nervous system isn't evaluating accuracy. It's evaluating safety. So when you introduce logic facts, timelines, explanations, her system doesn't hear clarity. It hears dismissal. Not because you intend to dismiss her, but because logic implies something dangerous in that moment your feeling is incorrect. That's why explanations feel like erasure. You're not just offering another perspective, you're replacing her internal experience with your version of reality. And when emotion is active, replacing an internal state feels like invalidation. It feels like being told that what she feels shouldn't exist. Fixing makes it worse. When you jump to solutions, you signal superiority without meaning to. You position yourself above the experience instead of inside it. To a regulated mind, that looks helpful. To an emotional nervous system, it looks like control, like being talked down from, like being corrected instead of understood. This is why certain phrases explode situations instantly. That's not what happened. You're overreacting. Here's why you're wrong. Each one carries the same underlying message. Your internal reality is unacceptable. Even if your facts are accurate, even if your tone is calm, even if your intention is peace, the emotional system doesn't parse intention, it reacts to implication. Men often confuse escalation with stubbornness. They think she's refusing logic. What's actually happening is more precise. Her nervous system is defending itself from invalidation. The louder the emotion, the more logic feels like rejection. When emotions speak, logic sounds like rejection. This is why arguments spiral. Every explanation adds pressure. Every clarification sharpens resistance. Not because she wants conflict, but because her system feels threatened by being overridden. Understanding this changes how you interpret escalation. You stop seeing emotion as irrational opposition. You see it as self-protection. And once you recognize that, you stop pushing logic into moments where it can only do harm, and you start waiting for the moment when logic can finally be heard instead of resisted. When emotion peaks, information simply doesn't get through. This is not a character flaw or a refusal to listen. It's a bandwidth issue. High emotional arousal drastically narrows cognitive capacity. The system prioritizes sensation over analysis, impact over accuracy. And this is where most men unknowingly sabotage themselves. During an emotional spike, perception collapses inward. Attention narrows. The nervous system filters aggressively. Words don't arrive as meaning, they arrive as stimuli. They're not evaluated for truth, but for threat, comfort, or pressure. This is why you can speak clearly, slowly, even kindly, and still be completely unheard. Men assume that if they choose the right words, understanding will follow. But at emotional peak, words are the least important input in the room. Tone becomes dominant. Posture, pace, energy. The way something is said overwhelms what is being said. Content loses priority because the system is still trying to stabilize itself. This explains a painful pattern men often experience later. She doesn't remember your explanation. She doesn't remember your logic. She remembers how you said it. Whether it felt cold, whether it felt dismissive, whether it felt controlling, or whether it felt grounding. The facts disappear. The emotional imprint remains. That's why arguments feel so unfair in hindsight. You replay the conversation thinking, I explained that perfectly. And she remembers it as pressure, as tone, as an emotional experience, not an exchange of information. You're evaluating accuracy. She's recalling impact. At emotional peak, timing matters more than truth. Even the right words delivered at the wrong moment register as wrong, not because they are false, but because the system cannot receive them yet. This is why repeating yourself never helps. It only increases stimulation, which further reduces bandwidth. Men want resolution immediately. Emotional systems don't. They need the intensity to drop first. Until then, everything you say passes through a distorted filter. Meaning is lost. Intention is mistranslated, and your logic becomes just another source of noise. At emotional peak, tone is louder than truth. Once you understand this, you stop fighting the moment. You stop trying to push clarity just uphill against a nervous system that can't carry it. You recognize that timing is not avoidance, it's strategy. And when you wait for emotional intensity to subside, something changes. Words begin to land again, not because you became more convincing, but because the system finally had the capacity to hear you. Men don't make things worse because they're careless. They make things worse because their instincts activate at the wrong moment. When emotional intensity rises, silence feels dangerous. It feels like loss of control. And for a man, loss of control triggers a familiar response. Explain, clarify, lead. Explaining feels like leadership. It feels proactive. It feels like doing something instead of standing still while the situation so slips. So men lean forward. They add context. They justify. They correct misunderstandings in real time. And without realizing it, they apply pressure to a system that's already overloaded. That pressure doesn't calm emotion, it amplifies it. More words don't create clarity, they create weight. Every sentence becomes another stimulus her nervous system has to process. And because it can't, resistance deepens. Emotion doesn't resolve, it tightens. This is why the pattern feels so predictable and so confusing. You talk, she escalates. You clarify, she withdraws. You explain more carefully, she becomes distant or sharper. From your perspective, you're trying to save the conversation. From her system's perspective, the conversation is becoming unsafe. Men often mistake escalation as defiance. They think she's refusing to listen. In reality, she's trying to protect herself from overload. Emotional resistance isn't opposition, it's defense. And the more you push understanding into that space, the more the system closes access entirely. This is where chasing clarity becomes self-defeating. The desire to be understood turns into the very thing that blocks understanding. Every attempt to resolve the moment adds friction, not because resolution is wrong, but because timing is. Men want immediate access. Emotional systems require space first. When that space isn't respected, withdrawal becomes the only option left. Silence replaces engagement. Distance replaces dialogue. And the man feels shut out without knowing why. The more you chase understanding, the less access you get. Once you see this reflex clearly, you stop blaming yourself for not finding the right words. You realize the issue was never phrasing, it was pressure. And when you stop applying pressure in moments of emotional intensity, something unexpected happens. Access slowly returns on its own. Not because you spoke better, but because you stopped forcing entry into a system that needed time to reopen. Responding correctly in emotional moments isn't about restraint or strategy. It's about regulation. This is where most men misunderstand power. They think silence equals suppression and waiting equals weakness. But regulation is neither. It's leadership at the nervous system level. Regulation beats reasoning because emotion doesn't need to be corrected, it needs to settle. When you pause explanations, you aren't giving up your position. You're protecting access. You're allowing the emotional system to complete its cycle without interference. And cycles only complete when they aren't resisted. Presence beats persuasion. You don't need to convince her of anything while emotion is active. Persuasion assumes openness. Emotional intensity closes that door. Presence, on the other hand, signals stability without pressure. It says, "I'm here, and I'm not threatened by what you're feeling." That signal alone does more to restore connection than any perfectly crafted argument ever could. Timing beats truth, because truth delivered at the wrong moment is experienced as force. Even the most accurate statement can feel invasive when the nervous system is overloaded. This is why pausing explanations is not avoidance, it's precision. You're not withholding truth. You're waiting for the moment it can be received. Acknowledging emotion without agreeing is the fulcrum. You recognize the feeling without validating the narrative. I see you're upset, not you're right. That distinction keeps you grounded while allowing her system to feel seen. Feeling seen lowers intensity. Lower intensity restores access. And then you wait, not passively, calmly. You let the wave pass. You don't chase closure. You don't force resolution. You allow the emotional charge to burn itself out naturally. When it does, something changes. Curiosity returns. Cognition re-enters. The door opens again. That's when logic works. Not before. Calm restores access. Logic only works after. Men who master this don't become silent or manipulative. They become steady. They stop fighting emotion and start outlasting it. And because they don't try to win the moment, they end up being heard when it actually matters. This isn't about saying less forever. It's about knowing when to speak. And once you understand that timing is power, you stop losing conversations you never needed to argue in the first place. This truth isn't here to make you cynical or detached. It's here to re-anchor your identity. Because the moment you stop mislabeling emotional dynamics as irrationality, you stop fighting something you were never meant to overpower with words. This isn't about women being illogical. It's about biology outranking debate. Emotion is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. It evolved to take control before thought, not after. And once you understand that, the entire frame shifts. You stop taking emotional moments personally. You stop seeing them as contests to win or problems to solve. You start seeing them as states that move and eventually pass. Most men lose ground because they try to dominate the wrong layer. They argue at the level of meaning while the nervous system is still in motion. They push for conclusions while the body is still activated. And every time they do that, they abandon their center in exchange for points that don't matter. The real shift is this. You stop arguing with emotion and start managing timing. You let emotion speak without trying to silence it or submit to it. You don't escalate. You don't retreat. You hold your position calmly and wait for the system to come back online. Holding center is the skill most men were never taught. It means you don't need to prove your point immediately. You don't need validation in the heat of the moment. You don't outsource your stability to whether you're understood right now. You remain grounded even when clarity is temporarily unavailable. That groundedness does something powerful. It changes how you're experienced. Instead of being another source of pressure, you become a stabilizing presence. Instead of competing with emotion, you outlast it. And when the emotional intensity fades, as it always does, your words finally land. Not because they're smarter, but because the system is ready to receive them. This is where men regain influence without manipulation. You're not withholding truth. You're respecting sequence. You're not silencing emotion. You're letting it complete its cycle without interference. And that patience is not passive, it's controlled. When emotion speaks, logic waits. And the man who understands this stops trying to win arguments in moments that can't be won. He stops burning energy proving points that won't be heard. He holds center. He manages timing. And because of that, something subtle but profound changes. He starts being heard again. Not louder, not more forcefully, but more deeply, because he's no longer fighting the biology of the moment he's moving with it. And once a man learns that, conversations stop being battles and start becoming gateways.